All right. Hey, everybody. We are, we'll introduce ourselves. I'm Andrew Robinson.
I'm Evan Elder.
Kristin Kelly.
Yeah, and, Evan and I have a podcast that is yet to be released, but it's in the works, that we do where we talk about kind of different issues and everything. And one thing that we've been wanting to talk about is the kind of the Black Lives Matter movement and the different racial tensions going on in our country right now, and how we can make a difference, and how we can see people come together to make our country a better place to live in. And so we decided, instead of going the podcast route and having to edit that and it come way later, that we would go ahead and do a video. That way you guys can see it right now.
Yeah.
And Kristin is a good friend of mine, and she's an extremely wise person. Every time I introduce people to her, I tell them that she went to Vanderbilt, because being a boy from Alabama, you grow up being like, Vanderbilt, that's the smart school. That's the school that all the really, really smart people go to. So anybody from the Southeast knows that that's accurate. And but Kristin's also got an amazing heart. She's involved in activism on a lot of different levels, and is a middle school teacher in Fort Worth Middle School, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so I just felt like she was a really good voice to be a part of this discussion with us. And also, sometimes when you're talking about certain things, it's better not to just have two white boys discussing this,
So like, essentially, since we are kind of behind on releasing our podcast, we wanted to do this in a timely fashion. We feel like, because we're here in the Dallas area, there is so much that is just relevant to what's going on in our society right now and in our world here in Dallas specifically. So we wanted to go ahead and touch on those issues, and we wanted to do that in a very open and honest way, which is what our goal is of this conversation today.
Yeah, for sure. So I guess we're just gonna kind of have a conversation and let you guys into it. And we start with Chris and I. We were both at the march Thursday night, and obviously a really traumatic thing, a horrible deal happens at the end. One thing that I've been trying to tell people a lot is that the march was a peaceful march, and that it wasn't like, hey, we hate all cops, but we want justice for bad cops,
right,
and we're willing to praise good cops, and so we just want justice for everybody. And so tell us some of your takes, Kristin, from the march and just everything that happened.
So the march was, I think, very beneficial, not only just because of that it was peaceful, but I think it was beneficial because marches are a space for people to grieve communally, like to have time to come together with people that are fighting for the same things, fighting against injustices, to come together and grieve about something that's taking place in their community. And I've been having a really hard time with every time I have to speak of the march, or every time my friends that were there, such as Andrew, have to speak of the march, we always have to say, it was peaceful, but it was peaceful. And I just think there's this narrative given to when people of color come together, and then when people not of color come with people of color and stand with them, there's this narrative given that there's hostility or there's anger, and there's a right for people to be angry that night. Yeah. And so the fact that we have to say, but it was peaceful because what happened at the end, I'm struggling and wrestling with that, because there's a need for people of color and people that stand with people of color to be angry with race relations in this world, in this country. And so that night was, just like with everyone else, I say it was a peaceful night with the marching. And then there was terror that happened. And I think it's so traumatic that we now live in a war zone where we can for 1 hour be marching peacefully, be marching against injustice, and the next hour be grabbing babies and mothers falling on their sons, not knowing where gunshots are coming from. So I was proud to march with my brothers and my sisters there that night, and at the same time, and Andrew can attest this, at one point I just let out a scream, and it was a scream out of frustration. Like, I can walk around every day with a smile on my face, understanding the privilege I live into as growing up middle class, having an education, that understanding that I live into certain privileges, but also understanding that that privilege is not guaranteed to the next generation behind me, or it's not guaranteed to my nephews or my nieces, and it's a split second thing that can be taken away from you.
Yeah.
So
that moment, I thought to me, when I think about it's almost, we've talked about this. It's almost like it was two separate events.
Yeah,
we had this march that felt like it was so healing and so beneficial, like you said, and then it was over, and then there's like this other thing that's like a whole separate thing. But from that second event with the shooting and all of that, whenever I go back to thinking about it, the most poignant moment to me is that moment that you let out this scream and then drop down to your knees, because I was just like, and we've kind of talked about this a little bit, that idea that a sacred space had been violated.
Yeah,
you talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. Well, the sacred space is being. There are a few sacred spaces that were violated. So the sacred space of just having a march in general. The sacred space of Black and brown bodies in such a multitude.
Yeah.
Like being able to flood the city and police being there and being like, we're prepared for this. It's okay. Like, we're here with you. Yeah. So, like, that sacred space of reconciliation, the sacred space of just having a space. So those two spaces, I think, and then the sacred space of emotional and spiritual. Like, just that space you hold within yourself, waking up every morning, taking, like, a breath and saying, I'm alive, I'm here, there's so much life to have. I think all those spaces were interrupted at that very moment. And so that scream is kind of like when I hear like my ancestors say, like, sometimes there's no words, there's just no words. All there are those deep groans, because there's something in that scream and that feeling that represents so much more than you can ever articulate. Yeah. And I think for me also knowing that the rage that was built up and pinned up in a Black man who was the shooter, that rage, it was so much more than just that day or these last two shootings that got him there. Yeah, for sure. And I don't think we really, as a country or community, are paying attention to what got him to that point. Yeah, because there's so much more than just these last two killings. And then I see on the news how the two pictures they show of him, they're two distinctly different pictures that they show. One where he's in a dashiki, which represents like Africana spirituality, and then one where he's in American military garb, which represents like war. Yeah. And I just think we aren't dealing deeply enough with the emotional and spiritual tension that's taking place, because that's where that healing is coming.
Yeah. So let me ask this, because I wasn't at the march, but like, I think the way that it's been portrayed and getting home that night and seeing the news, and just the only thing that I've had to go off of since, not being at the march is what the media has been showing of it. Mm-hmm. And we talk about, this was a peaceful protest. Can we like elaborate on that a little bit? Because, like what was this protest to so many people, to you guys that were there, you as a Black woman, and you as a white male, like what was it that this protest meant to you guys that brought y'all to this point? Wow,
yeah.
Well, for me, like, I felt for a while that if there's any truth to this white privilege thing, which I believe that there is, and I know a lot of people get mad when you say that, but if there's any truth to this white privilege thing, well, I'm going to use my white privilege to stand beside those who are oppressed, whether that's Black people, Hispanic people, immigrants, LGBT people, whatever it is. If I have any privilege or any standing in society, I'm going to use sacrificed a great deal for my hardline stance on nonviolence, and because of that, and because I feel like I'm fighting for Americans to lay down their arms and to give up this myth of redemptive violence, because of that, I find that I find myself taking any of these shootings kind of personally, like we failed. This work that I'm trying to do, it didn't accomplish what it wanted to. So with the Orlando one, we're walking and it was quiet, and I was like, I felt myself as we were marching together, my emotions healing, you know, and being able to be with people who felt like one of their sacred spaces had been violated in a gay club, you know, and so then at this march, at the Black Lives Matter march Thursday night, you know, as we're walking and we're chanting, it's louder, there's more energy going on, and that same feeling of, okay, and this kind of hope when I look around me and I see people of all races locking arms together and calling each other brother and sister, and understanding that we're on the same page, and even cops standing next to us understanding what we're marching for. You know, when I see all that happen, it gives me hope, you know, and so in the same way I was marching and feeling healing. And one thing that I've had people talk about is, you know, oh, there were people at the end that I heard saying F the police, you know. And first of all, I want to point out that was like, if you listen to when the people were saying that, as opposed to some of the other chants we were doing, hands up, don't shoot, or no justice, no peace, those kind of things, you can tell there's a major difference in the volume, because it was a small group of people that were saying things like F the police or whatever. But even still, we have to acknowledge that what that march did is it created a space, like Kristin was saying, it created a space for negative energy to be released in a positive way. So you've got people who are saying F the police, but they're saying it in the confines of this march where they're not hurting anybody. They're not doing anything wrong. They're not breaking any laws. They're not causing harm to another individual. They're releasing this emotion inside of them in a way that gets it out so that they can go back about their normal lives and be productive citizens. The problem is that a lot of people are looking at these marches and trying to convince themselves and everybody else that the people in it aren't productive citizens. You know, and that's a major problem that we have. But ultimately, the march, you know, the shooting to me is a completely separate spectacle. But the march was a really healing thing, and a space where people were able to get out whatever emotions they were feeling, and to be able to come together with people who didn't look like them, you know, or from different socio-economical statuses than them, and everything, and come together and say, hey, we all understand that we're all feeling pain here, you know, and even more so for my black brothers and sisters who, you know, I take these personally, but for them, when they look on the TV and they see their people that look like them being murdered live on TV, you know, often, you know, it's a different level, you know. We have to understand that and try to have some compassion in that sense.
I think that's interesting because I remember you had made a post recently about that, how, like, talking about the productive members of society kind of thing, and how, like, these marches are happening, like, after work hours, like, like all this, like, these are people with, you know, lives and like jobs and careers, and, you know, Kristin went to Vanderbilt and as a school teacher. I mean, like, these are people with jobs and productive members of our society. And so yeah, what was that march for you, Kristin? What was that?
And I agree with Andrew, like, completely on the fact of creating that space to get negative energy out. And I just think about, I don't know why Andrew was speaking, I was thinking about how body was used in that space, and how every time we see, like, if there's police brutality, it's a violation of the body. Like, there's actually a physical violation of the black body, where the black body is not their own, where the brown body is not their own, but it's this fact of the state has to mandate you are still ours. And I think the march created a space where the bodies, when we weren't told when to raise a fist. It was like, if you felt that rage, raise your fist. If you felt, there were some men there, if you felt hot and angered, take your shirt off, type thing. And the police were surrounding this space, but no one was interfering with that bodily space. And so the fact of body and voice, if you can control those two things, and you'll keep your mind. Like, you'll keep your spirit if you're allowed to control your body and your voice. And once your body is taken from you and made and controlled, and once your voice is taken from you and not heard, that's when your mind starts to go. And I think that's what's happening in the black community. where our bodies are being taken by the state and be taken by white supremacy, and where our voices are not being heard, and so therefore then we have cases like the tragedy that happened after the peaceful march.
Yes.
Because we had a space where bodies were and voices were able to free themselves, and then after that, it's when the rage from a body and a voice wasn't able to happen, and that's when the explosion with Micah happened. And so I thought about that when you say peaceful. I think it's peaceful because there was that expression of, I can be me in this space. I can be freely me in this space because people know I'm angry enough that you cannot hold me down.
Yeah.
And I think everyone had that mutual feeling towards one another. So when we said lock up, or like lock your arms together in the sense of peace, some people couldn't contain it, and that was fine. They were allowed to break away, but no one said, okay, you have to lock up, you have to do that. And so I think that was part of peace being created, when you give people the choice and dignity. And I think everyone felt like they had dignity and value in that space. Yeah. And like with Andrew's, when people were saying F the police, I don't know if people were, if someone came to me, and I don't know if the police name is Mark, but if Mark came up to me as a police officer, people probably wouldn't say F Mark.
Yeah. Yeah.
But they're saying F the system that Mark represents. Yes. Nothing against Mark, and I think that's sometimes where that phrase gets blurred. And yes, I'm not one to say it, but I understand when people say it. Yeah. Because I think they're talking about something more, because if your first initial understanding of a system that has been set up to bring you down is the people behind that badge, then that's what you're going to say F to. Like,
and if you really want to understand this, for those of you out there who, haven't listened to rap or anything like that, go look up the lyrics to the song "Fuck the Police" by NWA. And read them with an open mind. And yet there's some violent stuff in there, but you try to hear the pain in those statements. And this is what I've said to some people before. What that march was doing, and even allowing people to say the F the police stuff and everything, what it did is give people a place to express the pain in that NWA song without the violence,
And in that context.
Yeah.
It didn't after we left the march, when I was standing with people on the sides when we were waiting to clear, I never heard F the police once. Yeah. Because the space was gone. The space was created, and they knew, this is not say outside of that space, but that was a safe space. And it wasn't the fact of like, I can't say it because there are real police around. It's just like, no, I got it out. Yeah. And now I'm in a safe space. I'm not saying F people who are here in front of me, but that space, that was very...
I think when we live in a society that is so polarized between victim and oppressor, that it becomes the temptation that everyone wants to play the victim. Everyone wants to get over here on the side of the victim, and here's and get off the side of the oppressor. I mean, like you look at, even you go back to, look at Hitler. I mean, he thought he was doing a good thing. He at times played the victim. A lot of times. So I think that it's harder to get yourself to a place where you can back out of your own context a little bit and look at this from a bird's eye view and see how do I get myself into a different mindset to see where is the real victim and where is the real oppression, and how do I do my job as I believe a Christian to stand with the victim and to fight with and for the victim. Yeah,
that's a great point.
Which I think is where we get the idea of Black Lives Matter versus the rebuttal being all lives matter. You know what I mean? Because it's this idea of like, I feel like I'm being put on the side of the oppressor, but I need to get myself back to the side of the victim. Like I'm like, Black Lives Matter. Yes, well, but all lives matter. Okay, but and so you're going back and forth in this because it's like, I can't stay on this side of the oppressor. I can't be the oppressor. I don't feel like the oppressor. So I'm going to put myself back in this place and trying to get it to a level playing field, but in reality, I believe it's a very gross dismissal of an actual issue that's at hand.
Yeah.
In that thought, and I'm gonna say something here that if there's any of my conservative friends watching, this might be where you turn it off. But if you get annoyed or frustrated when somebody says Black Lives Matter and you respond with all lives matter, but yet when those police died, you're posting Blue Lives Matter and things like that. Don't you dare ever say to me that all lives matter, because you don't believe that. Because you just don't. You cannot get frustrated when our black friends are saying, hey, we matter too.
Matter too, yeah.
And you can't get mad about that. And then when cops die, say Blue Lives Matter, because, okay, hey, I'm saying that. I'm saying cop lives matter. I believe cop lives matter. I believe all lives matter. When my black brothers and sisters, I'm seeing them die on TV, and I'm hearing from them that they feel that their lives don't matter as much as maybe my life does to my society, then yeah, I'm going to say, hey, black lives matter. When my cop friends are telling me that they don't feel supported and they don't feel like anybody cares when they're gunned down, hey, I'm going to say, hey, cop lives matter.
Yeah.
But don't pick one over the other and then try to say all lives matter, because then what you're saying is, hey, I'm going to support anyone except for the black people when they cry out and say, hey, our lives matter. You know, we have to, if our friend Sydney said, you know, she doesn't want to be considered an ally for one specific thing, because we have to be allies for everybody. And so if you're not an ally for all of humanity, get rid of your freaking all lives matter hashtag, because you don't believe it.
Yeah.
You know, I'm sorry, but that's real.
Yeah, and I think people will almost be comfortable if you say Black Lives Matter too, with that implicit too.
Yeah.
And I'm like, no, we're not going to say that too. We know, like Sydney was saying too, she's like, all lives matter is the goal.
Yeah, that's
the thing is, it's not the reality.
Yes.
And so it's like, we have to look at our reality. If Black lives don't matter now, then you have to say Black Lives Matter. Because we're seeing too many people understand Black lives don't matter. And I think it's just also the idea of what blackness is. Like, Black lives can matter if it has to do with, like, pop culture.
Yeah.
But you don't want to say Black Lives Matter, but it's still black. Like, it's still given to you by someone who is black. Or black is, if someone is a lower and wherever they are, that's when we start to understand what blackness is. So if blackness is implicitly lower in society, whatever that may be, then we have to get to the point where, like where you said, get to the point where we have to bring everyone, look at the side that is treated the worst, or look at the side that's the most victimized, or the most polarized, look at that side, and be like, that side, that matters, and it happens to be Black lives.
Yes.
That's there, so.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. So, I don't know, I think, are we wrapping up, or do we have more to say?
Well, I think that basically what our goal was here today, and I think we kind of hit it in this short little video here, is that we wanted to just kind of open up this conversation, have an open and honest conversation, because I don't think we're going to get anywhere if we aren't able to sit down like this and just talk openly and honestly about it. If you've seen anything in here that you disagree with, that's fine. You know, that we want to just open up this conversation and have it honestly, so that we can get all of this out on the table, so that we can avoid events like this in the future, so that people realize that they're being heard. You know, I think that's the biggest thing is the reason for these marches, the reason for all this happening is because overall, people feel like they're not being listened to. And I think that we need to create that atmosphere where people feel like they matter and where they're being listened to.
Heard, yeah. Kristin, you have any parting thoughts?
I've a lot of stuff like going on in my head. But I guess as a middle school teacher who teaches basically 99% Black children and Latino children who have it in their mind that their lives don't matter, so therefore they create a narrative for themselves, trying to matter to somebody, and it's not the most positive way. So as I see them, I just think about practical actions and goals in order to, so my babies, and I call them my babies because I treat, they're my children. But in order to understand that their lives matter, understand their identity, understand their purpose, and understand that they are not the threat that society creates them to be, and that there needs to be mutual understanding between both sides, any side, of that all lives is the goal, all lives mattering is the goal, and that right now, it's not our reality, and so how do we change that with action, practical action, that I can actually sit down
Yeah.
to my students, because I'm out here marching, talking, being in community with folks, and every day I try to implement that, give that to my students, and it's just being shot down by what they see on TV, being shot down by their reality. And so I think I don't do this just for my sake, but just that those kids behind me, coming up behind me, so that we can all be in community together. And I really don't want to march anymore. But I'm going to keep marching until something happens. Like, I just don't want to do it anymore. But something has to change. And I think it has to change with action, whether that's calling your senators, understanding the laws. Like, if it's teaching your children and your community what laws mean, how to, when a police approaches them, what to do, their rights and all that way, talking to the police, and also talking to church officials, because at this time, I'm also a minister, and at this time, if the church doesn't say anything or do something, we have failed the gospel.
No
so
doubt.
That's my priority.
And so in that, a couple parting thoughts from me. One, like Kristin said, we don't want to march anymore, right? And when I saw her at the march Thursday night, the first thing I said to Kristin was, man, we got to stop meeting up this way, because the last time I'd seen her was at the march for the Orlando deal, and we're tired of doing that. Everybody is, we want to see our nation be a better place, and I believe that we can rise above all this, a couple things though. One is we have to learn that whether I, in my head, believe that a certain oppression exists or not, that when people are talking about oppression, we have to listen to them. We must listen to the words that they're saying, listen to how they're feeling, because their experience is real for them, and we have to honor that. And two, the only way that we will ever as a country get past all this stuff is if we stop believing and worshiping the myth of redemptive violence, because we have this belief that we can solve all our problems with violence, and that, hey, that comes from all sides of this stuff, and we've got to get past that, and like what Kristin said, if we can't do this, we failed in the gospel. If we can't make a difference, we failed in the gospel. To me, the gospel is how nonviolent activism changes our world, and I believe that we are headed towards redemption. We are headed towards that moment when the lion will lie down with the lamb. But who's going to be the people who will stand up and make the choice to be lions that will lie down with lambs? It starts with one person choosing to lay down their arms, choosing to trust in the Jesus Christ of the gospel, and follow Jesus' nonviolent way. And then another person, and then another person. And that's how we'll change the world. And you know what? We're going to keep marching, and we're going to keep talking about this stuff until all the lions are lying down with all the lambs. And I know it gets frustrating for some people, because they're like, are these people ever going to shut up? And no, we're not, because your life, you, the person that's watching this, that's annoyed as hell that we're talking about this, your life matters to us, And I'm tired of seeing people shot. I'm tired of seeing people dying. And so we're going to fight for change, we're going to fight for equality, and we're going to fight for nonviolence. And I hope you don't hate us, but you can hit that unfriend button if you do. If not, we'll be out with some podcasts soon. Love y'all.
And,
Peace.
and if you do want to actually do real action, check out your organizations in your community that are standing up for equality. Check out Next Generation Action Network. Check out Andrew's stuff. He definitely posts some great stuff. And if you're looking to make a difference, just look in your community and start with yourself. Turn the mirror inward, see what's going on with you, how you are adding to the problem or how you are changing the problem. So this right here, this is change.
That's right. We love you guys. Thanks for watching this video. If you made it the whole 30 minutes, then good on you.
Congratulations.
Me and Andrew will be coming up with some podcasts pretty soon. Stay tuned for that. Otherwise, we love you guys.